Hey, I'm Osman Faruqi, and this is The Drop, a culture show from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, where we dive into the latest in the world of pop culture and entertainment. I'm here in the flesh in Sydney with Thomas Mitchell and Mel Kembry. And I got to say, before we talk about anything else, I was feeling really good about myself this morning. I smashed a PB at the gym this morning in my weights, and I was feeling great. I was excited to brag about it to Thomas in particular, because I know he's also a bit of a gym guy. And then I saw him for the first time, I guess in a few months in the flesh, and he's looking good. He's looking good.
I mean, it's really like, I think the pure weight of carrying this team means that, I've just got the shred going on. But yeah, it's always weird being complimented so early in the pod.
Are you preparing for anything, or what has driven this kind of health kick, both of you?
Well, I obviously am preparing for Taylor this weekend.
Yeah.
So I just thought, out of the 100,000 people there, if I look the most shredded, if I look the most like Travis Kelce.
You could get the 22 hat.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, that's my plan.
You've probably just been like, you'll probably just sweat out like a few more kind of kilos.
I'll come out like fully, more like Maddie Healy by the end of it.
Well, you've brought up Taylor Swift, and I know that we've talked about
She's here, actually.
We've talked about her so much already this year so far, and I promise the focus of today's episode is not going to be her. It's going to be a different topic, a very, very, very good film, in fact, that we're excited to talk about. But yeah, she is here. It's very hard to miss her. Here as in Australia, in our minds. In Sydney, she was papped eating dinner at Pellegrino 2000 in Surrey Hills on Tuesday night. The country is going mental. Everyone's going crazy. We have to just, I think, talk for a minute about Taylor Mania in Australia, how it's manifesting, and without getting too like pointy-headed about it, like whether it's good or bad. I think there are some things to dissect there. How do you guys feel about her? I feel like when she got to Melbourne, she didn't really have much of a physical presence in the city. But as soon as she came to Sydney, it's like she's here. Like you see her out and about. How are you guys feeling as Sydney-siders about Taylor being in your town?
Yeah, well, I think she obviously knows that Sydney's better than Melbourne. No, I think, like, I was speaking to a friend of mine today about it, who's decidedly not, like, anti-Taylor, but just, like, not in the, the Swift mania. And he was like, I think she's just like a pantry moth. And that I just she's there, and I know she's there, and I can't do anything about it. And she just kind of keeps coming back. So, yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I love Pellegrino 2000, and I'm glad that Taylor got to experience it.
I'm kind of okay on Pellegrino 2000. Like, I've been there a couple of times. It's good. I was actually really mad at my mum because obviously, like, we're covering this stuff and, it's good to know where she is, I guess. My mum's office is 2 doors away from Pellegrino 2000. Like, you could have given me a heads up. Like, why weren't you there?
Well, I'm willing to go there. I mean, I haven't been in a while, but I'm willing to go there now and kind of do a review post-Taylor, what she might have eaten, the ambience she might have enjoyed.
Good luck getting a table, Mel, for the next 14 years.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I mean, you guys got the muscle. I got the pull too. No, I have to say, though, there is something I do enjoy that a few weeks ago, you two in particular were all like, it's weird that we follow Taylor's every move. The world's gone mad. We're not complicit in it. And look at us here, all Taylor fever. I feel like you guys are into it now.
Yeah, I mean, I literally spent the morning yesterday on the phone to Travis Kelce's dad.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. You spoke to Ed Kelce about Travis, his relationship with Taylor, whether he might be making his way down to Australia. He sort of hinted at this in a podcast. He said he was coming to an island, which is very vague. What's the gossip you've got?
Yes, close friend Ed Kelce, Papa Kelce, spent a lot of time on the phone to me. So actually 3 separate conversations.
Seriously?
Yeah, because I called him and I got his phone number from a contact at Channel 9 who had him on the Today Show. And I called him. It was just like so funny because he's at that weird stage where he's like adjacent to this massive storyline, but he's not famous enough yet to know what to do.
To know to not answer your call.
Correct. Like I guarantee you, in 1 month, Travis or Taylor or whatever will be like, all right, Dad, this is your Meghan Markle moment. Please stop answering the phone to journalists, like whatever. But anyway, he was like, oh, hey, like I've actually just got some folk over for dinner. Would you mind if I call you back in an hour and we can kind of get through this and get into all this? I think is what he said. And I was like, absolutely.
Polite. I love it.
I was like, Ed, call me back and let's get into all this. And lo and behold, an hour later, he called me back and we had a chat. He was very, very nice, very excited. We spoke all about his Super Bowl experience, sitting with Taylor's dad, and Taylor's dad was a college football player, so he loved that. And and then basically, I guess like the thing everyone wants to know is Travis coming to Australia for the Eras tour? And the dad actually seemed like almost maybe he was prepared for that one, and he was like, I know Travis is in Vegas doing a charity golf tournament, but he told me he was really keen to go to Sydney and Singapore, so he didn't he gave me like he breadcrumbed me basically. But yeah,
maybe he does know what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly.
We should get him on the pod. I have like so many more questions to ask him now that I know that he's kind of willing to chat.
Yeah, he was very funny. He told this really funny story about the first time they met, and like this also sounds amazing. On game day, Travis like says to everyone his friends and family and high school friends, go to my house and have a party before kickoff. Like, I'll leave the door open and then you guys come to the game. So all of his friends and family just like go and have a house party on the day of like game day.
That's like how we record the pod. We just
exactly.
get lit at your place. And
yeah, everyone go to my two-bedder in Dolls Point. And so he basically, the first time Taylor like went there, he didn't know who she was.
Wow.
And like there are so many people there. He's like, old high school friends of Travis that I don't remember their names, so I just kind of like pretend to know who they are. And she came up and was like, oh, hey. And he just assumed that she was some girl that like he went to school with. And then, Travis's dad's girlfriend was like, that's like Taylor Swift. Like, this is an important moment for you. So, yeah.
Wow. Do you think Taylor's like down with him just kind of chatting willy-nilly to the
No, I think this
media?
is what Thomas is saying. It's like when they can't figure out that Ed is just calling around. I mean, I should say we like all of us here deal with, I guess, like movie stars and pop stars, PR people on the reg, and there's like, a wide range of how sometimes responsive and whatever they are. Without giving too much away about the dark arts, I've found it really interesting how Taylor Swift manages to have such an interesting relationship with the media in that it's very controlled, very few interviews, very good at like keeping paparazzi images out of the media. But her team, as far as they've been in Australia and the way they're working with the media and just kind of navigating all these things and working with other organizations and institutions like charities she's giving to, it's a very, very professional outfit. Like, it seems to be one of the best I've seen, really.
Yeah, it seems pretty slick. And then you've just got Ed.
And you've got Ed on the other hand.
Yeah.
One thing we should have said with the Pellegrino chat is shout out to our good food guide colleagues who sort of put that on one of their restaurants to recommend that Taylor should go to or predictions. And, if Travis does come and they go out to dinner, any picks from you guys as to where they might end up? Caterpillar Club?
No, maybe Wings and Tins. I feel
Yeah,
like.
I'm saying like Fire Door. Like, he's going to want a big kind of
Bistecca or
400-year-old steak. Yeah, Bistecca's a good shout. Like, just get some meat into that man.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, we'll
Though
see.
you boys might be there, actually, given your
We're actually we're all going to Gold's Gym.
Yeah.
And then,
One of the things, it's interesting getting here into Sydney a couple of days before the show, having just been in Melbourne the week before. The vibe in Melbourne, the days leading up to the show, the first one on Friday and throughout the weekend, I don't think, people have said this a lot and it's kind of a cliche at this point, but I don't think there's been anything like this before in Australia. Like 300,000 people at the MCG over 3 days. The MCG being physically located in the city, I think also helps concentrate fans. Like you just saw from the morning where I live, in Brunswick East, which is sort of 40 minutes away from the MCG, just people in sparkly tops, in Taylor merch, getting on trams. The city was taken over in the afternoon. It was taken over in the evening as people spilled out. People compare this to the Beatles in the 60s when they came to Australia. I mean, that actually I don't think is a good comparison. Like the Beatles did not have 300,000 people seeing them in one city over the course of a weekend. I think this is probably like the cultural event of a century for this country. I think in Sydney it may be harder to grasp because of where Olympic Park is and people are coming in from all over the place, but there are going to be like close to 90,000 people over 4 days. Plus, of course, our great friends Blink-182 are playing at the same time, which is going to be really funny. And yeah, I mean, some people are annoyed at the traffic, or there are some people who think that it's gone on for too long and they don't get all the hype. But I'm really struggling to see anything to get upset about around the fact that so many Australians want to go see a show and have a great time. And my own experience from the show was that it was a sick time. Like these are very, very fun, nice people, overwhelmingly like young women who want to see an artist that they've liked for a long time, and they're looking out for each other. And the show's great. It's an extraordinary production. Like it's more like a musical theater piece than it is a live show. There's stage design changes, there's costume changes, there's backup dancers. It's pretty extraordinary. Like,
what would you give it out of 10? Like we gave it a great review, obviously, in the paper.
I think Man, that's tough. If I'm giving it out of 10, I'm giving it 9 out of 10.
Wow.
Only because I don't like the Reputation era stuff.
Right.
But that is like a very personal one for me.
And
Like,
so that there's something else to look forward to, I guess.
yeah,
a 10 out of 10 in the future.
Exactly, yeah.
I do think the Taylor thing is interesting in comparing it to the Beatles in that if you think of it, it is a gig, but it has just sprawled to so much more than that. Like there's the whole fashion side of it. There's the whole friendship bracelet side of it. Like it has sprawled into so many areas. Restaurants are having Taylor Swift cocktails. It's just the whole, the circus around it is so much bigger than just a person
It's a really good point.
stage.
And in Melbourne on the night of the show on Friday, the council put on this Taylor Swift drag performance, this drag queen, Taylor Sheesh, Filipino drag queen. There was thousands of people at Fed Square just singing along to these songs. Again, I'm like, I have like some stuff to say in a second about like what this means for music in Australia more generally, but who can be upset with any of this stuff?
Yeah, and it is kind of pretty incredible to see the different generations at these gigs. Like you have people our age, and then you have the crying 4-year-old who's there with a much older mum. And just because of Taylor's longevity when she started and who she is now, she has somehow managed to hit like almost 3 generations, I would say, of people are at her shows, which is really hard to see. Like we go to a lot of gigs, but you don't often see gigs that are spanning.
Yeah, the Blink 182 gig will be a very narrow demographic.
Yeah,
I
that's
feel
just
like,
Thomas Mitchell's demographic.
I was there. There was like so many aging millennials.
Yeah.
You guys are going this weekend to Taylor. How are the vibes? How is the anticipation?
Really excited. I can't wait to see it in person. I do feel like I have consumed so much Taylor concert content that I am kind of interested to see how I'll enjoy the show itself. But I know I'll love being in the vibe, and I know like being in the crowd, and I know it's an experience kind of that is once in a lifetime. So I'm excited for that. But I do wonder, now that I've watched so much of the show on various platforms, whether the show itself will be as exciting to me. Because I don't know, you had seen a lot of it, right?
Yeah,
before
it was
you.
interesting. Well, we sort of did this crazy thing where we live blogged the whole first day of it. And so when I got there on the Saturday, I sort of had deja vu because I'm like, oh, I kind of know what happens here. But most of the fans in the crowd have either seen the Eras film or have been watching this on TikTok for so long. I thought it was so interesting that one of the last songs that play before Taylor comes on is Lady Gaga's Applause from Art Pop, her 2013 album. And every fan is belting that out. And I'm like, I don't think Taylor fans are like big Lady Gaga Art Pop fans, but they clearly know from like the TikTok streams or whatever that this is the song that plays before Taylor comes on. And it's so interesting being in a stadium where everyone knows what she's about to do next. And so they've timed their drink breaks and they're whispering excitedly. But even with that being the case, and Taylor knows that's the case as well, she's very aware of it. And even having blogged it the day before, there's nothing like just being there. Like that's what's so great about live music or live theater or going to the cinema. It's not just what you're seeing on stage or on screen. It is that unique experience where even if you went to every single show, it would be different because of where you're sitting or what the crowd is like around you or the small changes that she would make on stage.
Yeah, and like speaking about why this is different, you are like, that is an interesting point about the level of audience interactivity, because there are certain notes that you know you need to hear as an audience member going to this concert. Like there's the double clap, there's the bridge in Cruel Summer. Like you kind of know.
I'm going so cold.
I'll send you some links.
You've got to do stuff because there are fans, they
Yeah.
get mad if like there's a guy there who's just like not dressed up and on his phone too much and like not singing along. There's
you're
there's
a
a
meme.
risk here.
You're
Yeah, I
a meme,
know.
especially a jacked guy like you.
God.
Yeah, don't mention John Mayer as my tip to you at this show.
Yeah, if I don't wear my John Mayer shirt.
But yeah, there are all these notes. So even when you're an audience member watching, you're also actually a participant in the show itself. Like you're a performer as an audience member.
Yeah, I'm mostly concerned, like, and this won't surprise you, Mel, about the weather, because I am like weather obsessed, and like the footage I saw from Melbourne, it was like a beautiful night.
It was 3 perfect, like 24-degree nights.
Yeah, and it was like the
crazy.
sky was pink, and it was like a lavender haze, blah blah blah, and then
Nice.
It was maroon, yeah.
whereas here, like I think we did a story today where the weather's going to be possibly shit.
Yeah.
And it's been pouring all week in Sydney, so. Yeah, I mean, once I get over my weather-related anxiety, which is, you know...
That is so true. You lose your mind when you see like a small cloud float by. You
I like to know it's like it's a
all-staff
control
the whole,
thing.
the whole
But yeah,
thing.
if I can, provided the weather is like perfect, then it'll be a great night. Otherwise, everything will be ruined.
The only other part of this that I wanted to touch on is, and again, I can't reiterate enough, nothing I'm about to say here is like Taylor Swift's fault or the fault of fans that want to go see her shows, but it is just so interesting seeing this really stark contrast to a live music show that is breaking records for Taylor and for Australia. It's so big, it's so exciting. Whilst the domestic scene is like basically every week we get a new live music festival that's cancelled. Like Groove in the Moo is cancelled. Splendor is like in its death throes, it seems. Falls didn't happen this year. The live music and even just the music industry in Australia, the ecosystem is tough. It's tougher for artists to make a living. It's tougher for them to get a break. It's tougher for them to make money on tours. It's tough to keep shows going. It's tough to make festivals. I kind of think that this can go two ways, right? Like, hopefully, there's a whole bunch of people probably who are seeing Taylor and it's the first time they've seen live music and they get the bug and they want to do more stuff. And I really hope that happens. And I hope that the Australian industry can harness that in some way. But I also sometimes wonder, like, okay, are we seeing, like, potentially from a generational perspective, the last artist that can pull something like this off? Again, it's amazing that she can, but I can't help but think, and I guess this is the curse of me overthinking these kinds of art things too much, is, yeah, maybe we'll look back and be like, that was like a peak because the way the industry is moving and the way that culture is moving and the way that like costs are going, that we just might not see anything remotely like this again. Maybe I'm just freaking out. I don't know how you guys feel about this.
No, I kind of tend to agree with you that Taylor Swift is the last pop star of her kind for many reasons, including many that you listed and what we were saying before about hitting those generational markers and kind of being emblematic of a monoculture that I don't think we will see again.
I think there will be another Taylor for sure. I just don't know how long it will be. I think, like, she is emblematic of the monoculture, but I think we need always to have that person. Like, we always need to have our Taylor, and I don't doubt that in 20 years when Taylor's in a different era, her Deep Heat era or whatever, then there'll be a new like person who probably will dominate in much the same way. Like, there'll always be one, I think anyway. But I think more like to what you were saying, Osman, it is like very depressing. Like, you know, it was like caught up with friends on the weekend and we were looking back at these photos of us at Home Bake and like
great festival. Yeah.
It was like, you know, Home Bake was this like Australian band only festival that was like massive at its peak. And, you know, this was in the days of like Big Day Out and stuff, and there was a whole like the festival culture was a very real thing. And it's just so sad now that even these like really rusted on festivals like the Splendor and the Merediths are like in trouble. And I do think that is really a bigger issue. And I do wonder if, you know, the Taylors of the world, I mean, I think maybe it's wishful thinking what you're saying, that people will go and get this live music bug. That would be amazing. But I just feel like it'll continue to be these huge acts that people, you know, save up years for to go to every single tour. But, like, will they go down the road and see a gig at Northcote Social Club or at the Enmore? Like, probably not.
Look, we'll probably have more to say, believe it or not, on Taylor next week when you guys have seen the show. Maybe we can do a little mini recap. But let's move on to the main focus of today's ep. So the Oscars, one of my favorite nights of the year, are inching ever closer. They're being held on Sunday, March 10th, US time. So that's Monday the 11th for us. Most of the films that have been nominated for Best Picture are out in Australia or have been released in the past 12 months, but one isn't. And it's actually not coming to cinemas. It's being released on Tuesday on Prime Video. It's called American Fiction. It's written and directed by Cord Jefferson. It's his directorial debut for a feature film, and Cord actually won the BAFTA this week for Best Adapted Screenplay, which is another category the film is nominated in. It's based on a 2001 novel called Erasure by Percival Everett. The film stars Jeffrey Wright as Thelonious Ellison. He's known to his friends as Monk, after the jazz musician of the same name. He's a professor living in Los Angeles, and it seems like he's had some well-received novels a while ago, but he's very much past his very buzzy, hyped era. He gets sent on leave after a few very funny, racially charged incidents at college and heads home to where he was raised in Seaside, Massachusetts.
How did you come to write this book?
What really struck me was that too few books were about my people. Where are our stories? Where's our...
There he becomes aware of an extremely popular new novel written by a younger black woman, played by the incredible Issa Rae. Monk's not into it. He thinks his book panders to stereotypes about black people.
Would you give us the pleasure of reading an excerpt?
Yo, Sharonda, girl, you be pregnant again? If I is, Ray Ray's gonna be a real father this time around.
And he's very, very critical of it, but eventually, after his latest manuscript is rejected by all the publishers he sent it to, he decides to write his own heavily stereotypical book to prove a point.
I be standing outside in the night.
Deadbeat dads, rappers, crack. You said you wanted black stuff. That's black, right?
I see what you're doing. We sold your book.
And he does. The book goes ballistic, becomes a bestseller, is nominated for big awards, and all of this just makes Monk angry and angry. He's pissed off that white audiences only want one kind of black story. So there's like a whole side to this film that is a satire, I guess, on how art and culture, and particularly literature, operates at the moment. While that's going on, Monk is also dealing with family drama. His brother has recently come out as gay. His mother is suffering from Alzheimer's, and Monk slowly starts to realize he's starting to exhibit the same kinds of moral failings his late father displayed. So we're getting these two dimensions, the satire and this really moving, relatable family piece. The film has a brilliant supporting cast, including Sterling K. Brown as Monk's brother, who, talk about being jacked, looks awesome in this movie. And Adam Brody, one of our faves, who plays a director very keen to adapt the new book. Overall, I thought this movie was, like, brilliant. Like, I really like this. It's one of my favorites of this Oscar season. From the opening scene, it kind of reminded me of Tar, like this really smart, interesting way to tease out what the movie's about cancel culture and privilege and this idea of representation in art, but not taking a black and white perspective, being very nuanced. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this, both the movie, the ideas in it, where it fits into the Oscars race, why it's not being released in Australia. Mel, what did you think of the film?
I loved it. I thought it was an absolute delight of a film, which will probably not surprise you because it's got all of my favourite things like publishing, the literary world, a literary hoax.
Yeah, you never said yes quicker to an idea for a podcast.
I actually thought it was quite kind when you suggested this. I was like, that's nice.
I'm a nice guy. I think about
you've
you,
done
you know?
something for me. No, I thought it was so good. I laughed out loud at multiple points during this, and I thought the representation of the book world was, while being satirical enough to be funny, it was also very true. Like, from my experience of publishing and the industry, it is like so true as well. And then the family side and the family dynamic of it was quite heartfelt and brought another element to it. I guess my only criticism, which is kind of a backhanded compliment, is that, like, to me it felt almost too short. Like, I felt like it could have done a better exploration of both, you know, the points it was trying to make about book publishing and the points it was trying to make about family if it had more time. Like, I was almost like, this is one case where I do want many more episodes. Like, I want this split up and I want more of it. Whereas, I mean, it was quite a lot, nearly 2 hours of a film. It is substantial, but yeah, I was ready for more and thought it could have gone deeper if we had more time.
Yeah, I also really liked it, so we're all in agreement.
Nice.
I thought Jeffrey Wright was amazing.
Yeah.
He is just so, like, such a good actor, and he's not in enough stuff, and he kind of did like the cantankerous, you know, like professor writer guy just well enough, but then he was still really funny, and he's got this, you know, Sterling K. Brown is like the foil to him, the really loose brother.
And they're both nominated. He's nominated for Best Actor, and Sterling K. Brown's nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah, like and very much deserved. I just think it's so funny. I feel like we're really in this moment of like lots of different pieces of art from like films and books and TV that are looking very much at this same issue. And we've had some conversations, Mel, where I'm like almost got fatigue with some of it. And then this, like, weirdly, I didn't really know that much about the film. And then going into this, I was like almost like, oh, is it going to be another thing where we're looking at like cancel culture and whose story belonged to who or whatever? And it just was so well done. And the way it kind of made you think about the issues it was putting in front of you. It didn't, like, there was no, like, this is how you should feel about it. This is the right point of view, especially with Issa Rae's character. But, yeah, I just thought it took a really zeitgeisty issue and, A, made it really funny, and B, made you think about it.
Yeah, and I think it operates on so many different levels, whether you're familiar with the world of literature or not, really. Like, it still is very good at bringing you in and making you understand how this operates. But yeah, like you, Mel, if you are intimately familiar with the world of literature, and I guess I got to be careful how I phrase this, but without throwing any people under the bus or naming names, I mean, I've judged book prizes that have gone in very similar ways. And, you know, one of the running themes of this book is how, I guess, white gatekeepers, whether they are publishers, whether they are curators of festivals and events, whether they are judges of critical prizes, are aware that there is a conversation going on around diversity and representation, but do not really want to cede power around that. So they overcompensate by talking a lot about how much they love, in this case, like black people, and showering them with praise. And I mean, we see that play out in literature in this country. We see that play out in the arts and galleries. Like galleries in Australia, I have this like theory that the whiter the board and administration of a gallery or arts institution is, the more that there will be art from people of color in there because it's kind of their defense mechanism. It's like, well, I still want to be the publisher. I still want to be the person running it, but like, you can't attack me because
Look how progressive I am.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the movie did such a good job of exploring that.
Yeah, all about how to kind of try to give the symbolism of ceding some kind of power without actually doing any of it. And two characters in particular, the Adam Brody character and the publisher character, who is played by Miriam Shaw, who very funnily plays the publisher in Younger. So it's quite a nice crossover. Both of those characters are like so horrific but hilarious in the way they play the kind of well-meaning figure of, well, yes, we're trying to give like voice to people of colour, but then are obviously just purely about the corporatization and commercialization of those voices. I thought both of those characters were great.
The satire element of it really reminded me of Get Out in some ways, both in terms of skewering a certain liberal kind of white person, but also like the funny thing about both Get Out and this movie is the audience for it is likely the people who this movie is making fun of. Like in Get Out, most of the white people going to that movie are the people who would have been like, yeah, I would have voted for Obama a third time. What are you talking about? And the publishing character played by Miriam Shaw, who has these posters of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Like people going to see a movie like American Fiction are like, I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I wear one of her t-shirts. It's so good at making you feel uncomfortable as you're watching yourself be skewered.
Yeah, I agree. And like I will say, the only other thing I would have liked to see a bit more of in this film was Issa Rae, who plays Sintara Golden, who is the one who kind of publishes the book that is essentially...
We lives in the ghetto or something?
We lives in the ghetto.
Yeah, the kind of novel of suffering that Monk is so disturbed by. I would have loved to see more of Issa Rae in the film, but there is a scene that I think the whole film really hinges on between Issa Rae and Monk, where they both put to each other their reasons for writing certain kinds of novels. And, you know, he accuses her of only writing a novel to meet base desires. And she essentially says, like, what's wrong with giving the market what it wants? And I thought that kind of exchange, which it's short, but it's just the two of them, really brought another dimension that this film otherwise would have lacked. Like, it made what it was doing more nuanced because it did say, look, you're not wrong if you write a novel of kind of suffering. Like, is that necessarily wrong? And who is necessarily empowered by this? I just thought it was an interesting moment.
Yeah, and then I love that it's juxtaposed by they're having this really heavy conversation about race, and then the other white judge comes in and like sits down with her lunch. She's like, "What are we talking about?" Yeah, and that's the other thing. I thought it was very funny. This movie, like, I think especially if you're in, you know, if you're publishing adjacent or anything like that, it gives you like a really interesting look inside the world. Especially even like the writers' festivals and stuff. Like when he goes to watch Issa Rae's character do a reading, and he's like quite mortified. He's come from just doing his own very sad Q&A with like 5 people. And he goes to
that's
watch...
what you get. I get the Issa Rae crowds.
Yeah. Mate, 5, I'd be cheering.
Oh, here we go, plugging his book again.
And it actually is still available. But yeah, like he goes to this, you know, packed out auditorium to listen to Issa Rae, and she does a reading, and he's just like watching her, can't believe what he's hearing. And then like he's standing there in the crowd, and then like this one white woman stands up in front of him and starts doing like a standing ovation. I just thought there was like some really clever imagery in it, and yeah, it was a very, very funny movie. I was watching it like with my headphones on because my wife was watching Maps, which is also great, but she kept like, you know, when you like got headphones on and someone else is like listening to you laugh. And it really made me realize how much I was laughing.
Which is a really good testament to this movie. It's just under 2 hours. It's really meaty intellectually, and it's really funny. And this other side of it, I want to get your guys' takes on this, the kind of family dimension, because I'd heard a bit about this movie. I did not know there was a whole other plot going on about him kind of returning home and grappling with that. I thought it was done very well. I thought, particularly in these kinds of movies where there's a plot and there's a device and like we're kind of exploring these big themes through it, you just stay there. But everyone in the world is real and everyone's dealing with their own stuff. And I thought this movie did such a good job of having a character engage with those ideas and like, you know, take on this extraordinary gambit, but also have to do that whilst dealing with his own family. And then as that plays out, you understand a bit more about where he's come from and why maybe he feels so like angry and bitter about his career, the way that like blackness is represented, why he feels he's being, I guess, sort of let down by society. I thought the two worked quite well. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I do. And I think they kind of spoke to a broader message about authenticity with your family, with the world as an artist. Like it did point to that broader note. And I also the people in the family cast, like Tracy Ellis Ross, who unfortunately wasn't in it for long, but it is like the supporting cast was fantastic in this, and the dynamic with the family brought a level of depth, I think, that maybe avoided what could have seemed more surface and just more tricky, funny, glistening comedy of the satirical elements. It kind of added a layer of emotion to it that I think worked quite well with the funny parts. And in saying that, it wasn't like it's serious and funny. I think there was humour through it all.
Yeah, I think like I thought maybe tonally it like shifted around a little bit much between like, you know, obviously kind of the main chunk of the story and then like the family stuff. But I understood like why it was in there, and I still think they were all really good. But then if anything, and again I really like the movie, but I would say if anything, maybe the final act kind of lost me a little bit. It goes to some, like, we won't know spoilers, but it goes to some pretty strange areas and gets a little bit like out there towards the end. I still thought it was like really quite a nice ending.
I don't want to spoil it. I think maybe we can just say like it adopts a kind of Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese-esque meta take on film. And I hear you, like it sort of kind of came out of nowhere for me, but I also sort of did like, now that the movie has been nominated for an Oscar and there is commentary going on in this film about like what kind of art gets nominated for the big awards and that sort of a thing. It just was an extra layer that I thought was a very smart little hat tip to how the movie is going to be received, I thought, and how hard it is to end things.
I actually did say, and this sounds so funny, like right before I say it, just picking up the one white person in a really strong black movie. Adam Brody was actually really funny in this.
He was really funny.
And he's in this weird thing where he pops up in movies for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
As a villain now.
Yeah, and well, that's the other thing. He's like Seth is gone. He's got like the kind of Hollywood hair, and like I thought his character, he plays this kind of like, you know, the movie producer who's going to adapt it for screen and stuff. And I thought he both his kind of scenes were really, really important, and he was very funny, and he really nailed the like almost like best intentions, but really just a slick, gross Hollywood producer that sees like, you know, comments like poverty porn or whatever, and like wants to take advantage.
Yeah, he's making a horror movie about a massacre on a plantation. It's awesome stuff. Cord Jefferson, who wrote and directed it, he's had some pretty interesting credits in his career. He also, we should say, started out as a journalist. He kind of made his name writing for Gorka. So there's hope for all of us if we want to be Academy Award nominated directors. He was a writer on Master of None. He wrote for Watchmen and Station 11, which are like two of my favorite shows from the past couple of years. And he's credited on Succession as like a consultant. Do you know what that means? What was he doing on Succession?
I don't know what he meant. I thought he also had screenwriting.
Yeah, right.
credits on
Okay,
it.
cool.
Yeah.
On Succession.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Should I
right.
check that?
We probably should have should have like led with that to get people excited about this. This is like this absolute gun writer who's doing his own thing for the first time, and like props to him for turning his debut into a nominated like Best Picture film.
Yeah, so I did listen to an interview with him, and he was working on an Apple project that fell over, and he was very sad about that. And so he was just reading books, and then he discovered the Percival Everett book in a library, in a bookshop, went and picked it up, read it immediately, and he speaks about how he has never felt more connected to a book before or ever since, and he just knew that he wanted to turn it into a screenplay. Contacted Percival Everett, and he said, look, people have tried to buy it before, but I've not wanted to sell it. Let's have a phone chat. They had a phone chat, and then about later on that day, a few hours later, Percival Everett called him up and said, you can have the rights for 6 months to do what you want with it, and you can pay me back if it gets made. So
Really?
it's a pretty
really
remarkable
cool.
story.
That is a cool story. Good story.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was the category it won the BAFTA in, adapted screenplay. Maybe that's an opportunity for us to talk about like where it sits in the Oscars. So it's sort of interesting, as we said, it hasn't been released in Australian theatres yet. It won't be. It's obviously in the Best Picture race, kind of drowned out by like Oppenheimer and The Zone of Interest and those ones. But I think it could be a really strong chance for adapted screenplay. It's up against Barbie, which is a really funny adapted one. I think there was a big debate about that.
And Barbie's kind of being shut out. Like, I feel
Yeah,
like people
Barbie's not getting the awards buzz.
People
at
have
all.
accepted that maybe Barbie's Oscars run is like over now.
Yeah. It is a stacked category, though, even when you exclude Barbie. Oppenheimer, adapted from a book. Poor Things, adapted from a book. The Zone of Interest, adapted from a book. That's a pretty big and meaty category. But I would love if it won in that. I think probably Sterling K. Brown and Jeffrey Wright will also get blasted out by some of the bigger movies, probably Oppenheimer as well. But that'd be a fun win for Cord.
Yeah.
And it feels like this, in terms of the actual level of adaptation, I think this is actually probably had the most work done on it compared to what the actual book is.
Yeah, because my understanding, I haven't read the book, I'd be really keen to now, but my understanding is that the book includes the fake book within the book. Like, it's got a kind of experimental structure, so it's probably less clear cut. I mean, obviously Oppenheimer played with biography quite a lot and time and all of that. But yeah, he has obviously done quite an interesting job to remain true to the book but bring it to life on the screen.
And without sort of delving into the debates around representation that the movie goes into, the Oscars list this year is like, it's very white in all categories in terms of directors, best picture, actors, all that sort of stuff. So for a story that is tackling like race issues in such an interesting and smart way with an incredible like majority black cast and a black first-time director, it would be nice to see something like that. And I love Nolan. You guys know I love Oppenheimer. I'm not going to be mad if he wins 14 categories, but I'm really into this movie, and I think more people should watch it. It's not getting a release in theaters, which I find completely bizarre. I have no idea what Australian distributors are doing. Maybe they think it's too niche, but like I would have loved to see this in a theater.
Yeah, I wondered if it was like too American. Like it is a very like I mean it raises so many important issues, but it is like a very American feeling story in terms of like. I don't think it's the right decision, but I can see why it was made. Like, maybe they just think, this is not going to connect.
Yeah, I find it kind of unbelievable that it's not given some of the things that do get cinema releases.
No,
and I think it is very watchable. Like, even if you're not particularly interested in these subjects, it is such an enjoyable watch. Like, I would recommend this to most people, and I actually can't say the same about Oppenheimer. Like, I think that's a more kind of...
It's digestible. It's an hour and 50 minutes. Like, that's a great time at the movie.
Yeah, it's fun. You'll laugh. If you like the sentimental stuff, you've got that. Like, and if you like the more intellectual stuff, that's there too. So I would recommend when this hits streamers, it's definitely like
so
a movie
Prime
to
Video
watch.
from next Tuesday. The other thing I want to say, I don't know if there are film distributors listening to this. In fact, I do know. There's a lot of them listening to this. I have a gentle plea. So there's an increasing trend now. Remember there was this era where, I guess it was like 4 or 5 years ago, we kind of synced up with the US. Like movies started coming out here the same time it started coming out in America. And that was sort of this way to tackle piracy because we had these big 6-month gaps and people just download things and watch them. Now that gap has started to come back and you see films that were released in America a year ago just hitting Australian cinemas now or not at all in the case of American Fiction. And from conversations that we've had with distributors, it seems to be because they think that Australian audiences might not want to watch these more intellectual or arty films until the Oscar nominations come out or the Oscar wins come out so they can market it that way. I can see the logic to that, but I do think it's misguided. Like in an era where everyone in Australia is reading New York Times profiles on big films, they're listening to film podcasts from all around the world, Letterboxd. So you're on Letterboxd and you're watching everyone log 4 or 5 stars for a movie that you can't see for months and months and months. That just seems like a really missed opportunity when it seems like a lot of younger people are getting into film culture and are excited about going to the movies.
Yeah, I think it's an insane decision too, just from a marketing perspective and a sales perspective, not to use the buzz that generated overseas at the time in terms of red carpet appearances or interviews with celebrities to get people into cinemas here. I completely agree. And I mean, it happens in the book world as well, which I think is like ludicrous. Like often we will see books come out months after in Australia, and part of that is to do with formatting. They'll come out in a hardback version in the US, whereas we don't really do hardbacks here. But still, a lot of big books are coming out months later, and by that time everyone's read the reviews, everyone's read the kind of book club style take on it, and you just feel behind. And it does seem insane that in the 21st century we're still kind of the Antipodean, colony.
Waiting on the big release.
Yeah.
One of the most egregious examples of this for me was The Holdovers, which is another movie that I really love with Paul Giamatti. He's nominated for an Oscar. He won the Globe for Best Actor. That is a Christmas movie that was released before Christmas in America. It is set in the lead up to and on Christmas. It came out in Australia on January 11th. Like, I still love that movie, but that's crazy. Like, that could have been an amazingly popular movie if marketed as, and like, I don't understand how this, I'm not going to pretend that I know the ins and outs of film distribution. I know a good film. I know what people want to see. Like it seems so crazy.
And you know a Christmas film.
And I know a Christmas film. Yeah.
Film.
Holdovers is another great film. People should get around.
Obviously, the one for Thomas, the most egregious example is The Bear.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Still recovering. I'm sure this season 3, coming soon, we're going to be day behind or something, I think I read.
You said that last time. I don't trust you anymore.
Surely not. But yeah, we'll see. It's pretty crazy. Mel, I was curious. Obviously, there are plenty of great films about writers, this included. Where would you put this in your...
Oh, great question.
Great question. Films about writers, where does this rank for you?
Well, I imagine yours is Dead Poets Society.
It's actually Tortured Poets.
Yeah, the movie, not the Taylor album. No, I'm sure you're going to love that. Look, that's tough. There's a lot of good ones. Maybe adaptation would have to be up there for me. I haven't watched it in a while. I'd like to go back to the Charlie Kaufman film based on the non-fiction book about a writer who's suffering from writer's block. It's kind of wild and wacky, and it just builds up to this insane climax. Again, love it.
My one is, and it's sort of cheating. It's about a writer, but it's about a screenwriter. I think I've talked about it on this pod before.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Mank.
Yeah.
David Fincher's movie that no one's watched. Mank rules. It's
do
a
love
really
this.
good film about writing, the writing process, the politics of writing, like who's involved, and it's also a secret film, as I've said before, about communism in the
Even David
1930s.
Fincher's like, everyone, let's just stop talking about Mank. There's one guy in Australia that just keeps watching it like once a month.
This is why
I
you
hope
get no more
I hope
films.
it gets a Google alert every time I say
Every time
so.
you mention it. Mine is Fear and Loathing.
Yeah, okay.
A classic. I think I went through a big kind of Hunter S. Thompson stage.
That does not surprise me. You thought you were just
I thought I was going to do gonzo journalism.
generation gone mad.
Yeah, now I'm on the phone to Travis Kelce's dad, so
That's Gonzo, bro. What do you think Gonzo journalism? What do you think Hunter S. Thompson would be doing right now?
he'd probably be like over there at the Super Bowl. So I actually think I should probably have gone to the Super Bowl. But yeah, I thought like it's a classic, and I mean Johnny Depp before he was a bit cancelled. But yeah, great film, great book, and it's probably my favourite.
Before he was a bit cancelled. That's one way to put it.
Just a bit.
Let's leave American Fiction chat there. Out next Tuesday, the 27th on Prime Video. All right, on to Impress Your Friends. I wanted to start this one by doing a bit of like reflection on previous categories because I've consumed a couple of things. Thomas, you recommend it. I've got a praise for you and I've got
Wow.
criticism for you.
Okay,
Yours
cool.
are books, Mel. I don't have time.
Wow.
I gave One Day Ago. It's cool, not for me.
I mean, not surprised.
Bupkis, really didn't like it.
Really?
Really didn't like it.
It's so funny.
And in fact, got messages from people saying, please tell Thomas like that he needs to recommend better stuff. That is mid.
Wow.
But I'm starting with the negative to give you huge credit on a rec that I was not across, and it is one of the best things I've seen in a while. The Vince Staples Show,
Yes.
which you mentioned last week. Which thank you for bringing that into my life. It is really funny. It is really smart. You mentioned it sort of like Atlanta. It has a lot of similar vibes, so particularly the surreal nature of the show, but it is totally its own thing as well. It's on Netflix. Everyone's got Netflix. Like, could not recommend it more. Good
Yeah, and
shout.
it's only 5. They're only about 20 minutes or so. I watched it after you recommended it as well.
I feel like it's doing really well now. I mean, obviously not off the
Because
back
of
of my
you.
recommendation. No, but I feel like lots of people have gone and checked it out, which probably
Yeah.
like wouldn't have, and everyone seems to be like really, really enjoying it. So.
Yeah, I think it's got kind of word of mouth buzz because it
Yeah.
didn't have a lot coming out about it, and it
Not a
wasn't
lot of
kind of
marketing,
hitting
yeah.
your home screen or on Netflix. So yeah, I think that was well done, Thomas.
Yeah, perfect.
In terms of my recommendation for the week, I thought, given the conversation we had about Taylor and Australian music, something I want to do more is like talk about what is happening in Australia as well as focusing on the big stuff coming out from overseas. I wanted to recommend a new album by Middle Kids. It's called Faith Crisis Part 1. They're a 3-piece out of Sydney. This is their 3rd album. It's produced by Jonathan Gilmour, who's worked recently with the 1975 and Carly Rae Jepsen. It's a very like existential piece of work. It's an alt rock kind of indie rock thing in terms of the lyrical content. The title Faith Crisis Part 1 sort of gives that away. I think if you are a millennial feeling like everything's falling apart and is broken, which I think is most millennials, you will resonate with the themes of this album. But that said, it's also very fun and melodic, and it's a great album to like listen to and get into what they're talking about. It's a great album to play at a party, at a barbecue, just to have on. They're touring Australia and I think the States. I'm really excited to see them live. This is a really great record. And I say that as someone who wasn't necessarily a Middle Kid's head. I just came across my desk and I thought it was really good.
Yeah, great. I'm going to give that a go. And now my personal ambition is to recommend you something that you will actually engage with and then enjoy. So I've got one that has your name all over it, Oscar Wars, by the New Yorker writer Michael Schulman.
Mel, you're telling me this like I didn't read this.
I was about
already
to
read
say.
it?
12 months ago. Yeah.
We had a long chat about it.
On the pod? No, I don't think
think
On
it's
our
on the
other
pod.
pod together.
Yeah.
Okay, well, at least at least I know my get out.
No, good recommendation. Good
guys
recommendation.
should go to
So as well because I could see your screen as you were
Let me
preparing.
walk into
As you were
it.
preparing to, you'd be like, "Well, wait till you get a load of this one."
I was like, I've got it. I've got the one you're going to love.
When I was in
Yeah.
LA, I think last year or whenever it was, I heard an interview with him and I'm like,
Yeah.
I was at the Oscars Museum and I'm like, this would be a fun book to read.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
It is a great book. Well, let me tell the people anyway. You can
Fuck,
read
I can't wait for
this.
next week when you recommend Succession.
Let me
Mel was on that pod though, wasn't she? Yeah.
No, that was Meg. Let me tell the people anyway, ahead of the Oscars, great read, right? Really fun. History of the Academy Awards. It's told in a really interesting way too, right? Like it's not just kind of A to Z. He dives into certain moments, speeches, scandals. So you get an overview of the world at the time. I guess the whole point is that the Oscars is a reflection of not only Hollywood, but
And
society
it's always
as we
been
are.
completely crazy. If you're just getting
Exactly.
into it now, you're like, well, the Oscars are going crazy. It's like, they've always been weird.
It's fun, right? Politics, power, celebrity, money. Like, what more could you want? In fact, you couldn't want any more, which is why
couldn't want
you've already consumed.
Is this
book.
actually this is not even your recommendation. You're just doing this off the top of the dome.
No, I adjusted. I was quick. I can think on my feet. So, yeah,
It's a
no,
great
it wasn't my recommendation.
yeah.
But
I had another little one actually while we're talking about books and things. So a friend of the pod, Shard D'Souza's written this amazing article in the Face magazine, which is a British mag, about Charlie XCX. Interviewed her, spent a bit of time with her, listened to the new record. It's a sixth one. It doesn't have a name yet. It's just called XCX6. I love Charlie. I love Shard. There's really no one else I think I'd want to read on Charlie other than Shard. She talks about what it is like to make art and music in this current environment where you're hyper aware of the criticism and the feedback and how that has changed or not changed her process. Great story, great picks for it as well that the Daily Mail ripped off and made seem really horny and weird. But it's a very cool photo shoot and a very cool article that is, I think, free to read. Yeah, give it a go.
oh, great! I will.
Thomas, that brings us to you.
Yes. Okay, cool. So this one, I actually, just made a joke about Succession, but this one I caught my eye after it was described as Succession in a mosque. This is House of God, starting on ABC.
Osama Sami.
Yeah.
He's been blowing up my emails about this. I got to get around this show.
Well, man, I'm bringing it to you here.
You're trying to out-Oscar me. You're trying to out-Brown me right now, out-Muslim me. What's going on?
I just think...
Heard of mosques, bro?
I don't know if you know, but yeah, so basically this starts this Sunday actually on ABC. And seriously though, like that was they're always like, if you love this, you'll love this. But that did really hook me in. And the first episode is amazing. Like you open on this mosque in Western Sydney and you've got like all these different clerics and like pitching themselves to be the new head of the mosque. Eventually the victor is Sheikh Mohammed, played by Kamal El-Bashar. And like it literally does feel like the power struggle is so familiar. And it basically tells you how the new cleric, impacts the society and his family. And it's got these incredible characters. And, it's obviously amazing to see Western Sydney on screen and like represented by people who actually live there. The writing is great. I think it's like really funny, really clever, and a show that we don't see enough of. So yeah, I was hooked in. And if you into something like that, that's on ABC. It's a 6-parter. It starts on Sunday.
That's awesome. I actually feel really bad. I haven't seen it yet. I've been offered screeners through so many different people, and they're like, we'd love you to watch this and tell us what you think, is the only Muslim who talks about this stuff.
And you're like, I'll get my white colleague Thomas across.
Very American fiction thing going on here right now. No, I'm excited about that. It's a great shout. All right, so House of God will be on my weekend watch list. You guys, of course, have got your exciting Taylor shows coming up.
Yes.
Have a great time.
We're at the House of
forward-
Mother, I believe they're calling it, which is also known as a core.
We're going to the western suburbs. you know?
Correct, yeah. I must say, just quietly, I went to Blink-182 last Friday, and like, as we all know, anyone that's ever been to a show in Sydney, getting home from Olympic Park is a fucking nightmare. So I'm preparing myself mentally for this weekend when both Blink and Taylor are playing on Friday night. It's going to be...
The government is warning there's going to be like over 100,000 people there. You guys might not survive. This could be quite hectic.
Also spare a thought for Goo Goo Dolls and Matchbox 20 that played last night in Sydney. So.
No one cares. Yeah. Well, have a great weekend at Taylor, folks.
Thank you. We'll be practicing our claps.
Yes, my double clap era.
Hope you get the hat from 22.
Me too.
Do you know what that means?
This episode of The Drop was produced by Ruby Schwartz. If you enjoyed listening to today's episode of The Drop, make sure to follow us in your favorite podcast app, leave us a review, or better yet, share it with a friend or multiple friends. I'm Osman Faruqi. See you next week.